Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on which side of the country you're on. About a month ago, we talked about JVs, joint ventures. And just to recap before we get into the teaming agreement aspect of this, we're just going to recap on what a JV is real quick. So a JV is just a combination of entities, persons, businesses that combine into one entity, legal entity, that is. So you have a small business, large business, spin off, create a LLC, and then the small business is running the show, 51% owned by them. And now you have a joint business with multiple resources, and then you can compete on efforts. Believe it's 3 efforts up to 2 years. JVs usually last 2 years with a possible extension. The implications here, 51% owned by the small business concern in order to get that small business certification standard. 40% limits here, so 40% has to be done by the small business, 40 by the other, and the rest can be split up between subcontractors, etc. Past performance on either company can be used since you're now one legal entity. Again, 2-year commitments as a legal entity, and you may have this extended not only by your legal counsel, etc., but by the contracting officer themselves on the effort that you're working on. And it must not be permanently staffed by the experts in the field. You can have administrative personnel working for your company, but you cannot have it fully staffed by one or the other company. And then we'll continue. So that's just joint venture in a whole. And then we'll move on to teaming here. Okay, so aside from we're getting into something a little different than a joint venture, which is a whole nother monster, which is just the legal entity portion creating. You have harder times with disputes, etc. So you have a government solicitation or effort or program that you found. You realize, so you identify the requirement, and then now you realize that you do not have the capability to do this effort alone. So you need to find a teaming partner through teaming arrangements. So you can find a little stint of what the teaming arrangements are under FAR subpart 9.6, which is just a combination of 2 or more individuals or companies to perform in a prime subcontractor type environment, which is different from a JV, which is combination into a legal entity. You're now doing a prime subcontractor type work here. And then one thing to note with teaming agreements is that it is specific for one solicitation or government program. So in this case, you have a Polaris effort. So thinking about Polaris, if you're a small business and you are short of technical capabilities, financial capabilities, relevant past performance, it's a good idea to go out and find a teaming partner. Okay, so once we identify our potential requirement in the need of a teaming partner, there are some benefits for the teaming agreements. One, instead of a legal JV where you have to put all your bread in one basket, a teaming agreement is a good way to test the waters by limiting your exposure to going full in to another company to combine a legal entity. So you, I guess, lower your risk by teaming with a partner to test the waters prior to joining, creating a JV for them. So you limit your obligations via prime subcontractor, you limit your work, you limit your costs, etc. So you're just spreading out that risk a little bit. Also, with teaming agreements, everything is negotiable on a teaming agreement. That goes to the work share, your termination provisions, which are a must, exclusivity, which just means that are you teaming with multiple people? Are you teaming with just one person? You have your non-solicitation, which means that you can negotiate, hey, don't steal our key employees and we won't steal yours, etc. And again, this is just another type of tool to use to test the waters before entering into a full-blown JV with someone that you are unfamiliar with. And again, it's something that you can spread the risk upon prime and subprime with the cost proposal. So it's not going to be as expensive to you as a whole, because you are now disseminating some of that cost down to the subcontractor who helps you prepare the proposal, and then you submit it to the government. And again, one thing that you have to take into consideration here is that the Polaris RFP does state there is a subcontracting limitation here at 50%, which just, so they are looking that the prime is not acting as a pass-through and relying highly on a subcontractor. So you have to make sure that you are capable as a company, as a small business, of doing at least 50% of the work yourself. So if you can't really do much of the work and you send it down to a subcontractor, you can be disqualified or not win the award because the limitation of subcontracting clause in there. Okay, so some of the drawbacks. So we have our benefits of, finding a team who can help you win the award via technical capabilities, financial capabilities. You might find someone who is in good standing with the SBA, who is certified small business if you are large. So some of the drawbacks here with a teaming agreement is that you have to renegotiate a teaming agreement for each and individual solicitation. Unlike a JV where you have a legal entity and you can propose willy-nilly on up to 3 contracts, you have to renegotiate for each specific solicitation. So that could be time consuming if you don't have the standard templates ready at your company. So you have a risk. Let's see here. The risk posed. Okay, so you win the award. So congratulations. So you have your teaming agreement signed. You have an NDA with your team, and then you win the award. Congratulations, because you collaborated on the proposal, all that hard work, and now you get your subcontract agreement ready, and you cannot agree to the subcontract. You can lose the contract over that if you do not come to terms with a subcontract agreement. So you really have to do your due diligence with the company and usually discuss this in advance of winning the award. So another drawback is that if you are acting as a subcontractor to the Polaris effort, etc., you will not have privy of contract to the prime contract, unfortunately. So you essentially do not have control of the contract. You have to do as the prime says, and that could be frustrating if you don't have a cooperating team member per se. So that's one of the probably the biggest drawback there is you do not have privy of insight. You can't just go to the government unless something extremely wrong is happening, saying, hey, can we change this? Can we change that? No, you don't have that insight, unfortunately. So let's move along. Any questions?
And Brandon, I'm gonna tee up the conclusion here, and as we come to this slide, I want to make sure that the rest of the audience is kind of like preparing some questions, but it's a good comparison I have between the JV and the teaming. Kind of curious to see, from the perspective of companies that want to bid in and qualify, if even teaming is even an option based on leveraging past performances and whatnot. So I'll let you go through your slide. I just want to tee up to the rest of the audience that, get some questions ready so we can discuss, and plan on the joint venture versus teaming as it respects to qualifying for Polaris. So over to you, sir.
Okay, yeah. So if we think about the differences here between a JV and teaming, JVs are usually more arduous in the legality of it because you're forming a new entity. You have to pick your board of directors, if you're, etc. So you have, for JV, you have the formation of a new entity instead of just splitting the work share between your already established company, prime, sub. So you have an arrangement on the teaming side between the prime sub. The size standard does matter on both. However, if you are a small business and you create a JV with a large, The small business does 51%. You can claim that size standard. The size standard on the teaming side does affect who's running the show, prime, sub, if that makes sense. JV, you have a 2-year period. And with the teaming, you have to, each individual solicitation has to be specific. So there's a prime sub choice there, and you have to negotiate that. Who's the prime, who's the sub? On a JV, you are essentially sharing profit losses since you are one entity. And again, with teaming, you may be a subcontractor to a prime, and you may not share that profit loss as a contract in a whole. You'll just get your portion. The JV, each member of the JV has equal control of the contract, whereas the teaming agreement, the sub has no privy of contract, so you cannot control if you're a sub. So again, with JV, it's very hard to terminate a JV since you are a legal entity. You have to go through all that disputes, arbitration, etc. You have to disilluge your entity. Whereas teaming, you have the appropriate termination clauses in the teaming agreement and hopefully subcontract agreement, where you can terminate on the grounds of uncooperative. You don't win the contract. You can put anything in there to terminate on the grounds of. And essentially, that is the difference between a JV legal entity with teaming prime sub agreement.
And Brandon, as it respects to Polaris, so let's just go specific there, and being able to fill in the gaps that an individual company may have. Can a company actually, or can a team of companies actually share the past performance for the purpose of the solicitation in Polaris? It seems like that's not the case, but I just want you to expand on that. Can you tell us what's the what will be the call on teaming versus JV as it refers to accumulating points to qualify for Polaris?
Sure. Well, as a JV, you are absorbing both companies' past performance history, financial data, etc. Whoever brings it to the table. With the teaming, though, it's a little different on the grounds that you are bringing what you have as a company to the table. So if you need someone with a better past performance or more relevant past performance than you have to go out, reach out to them and team with them. And they may want to be the prime versus the sub. So then you have a multitude of choices you have to make and negotiate rather than being in the JV, if that makes sense.